Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Brother Chaney. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
So I think we are already recording, so we'll get right into it.
Okay.
On behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the Black Press of America, we welcome Don Chaney, not only a distinguished athlete, but a humanitarian. We're so pleased to have this brief discussion with you today. And we thank our relationship with Pfizer to help make this interview possible. Transthyretin amyloid cardiomyopathy. That's a long name, ATTRCM.
Yes.
Tell us, first of all, what's been your experience with ATTRCM, and how does this disease disproportionately affect African Americans, particularly African American males?
Yeah. Well, several years ago, I was experiencing palpitations, shortness of breath, and fatigue. And, my mom and my grandmother both passed away from heart disease. So naturally, after getting these symptoms or recognizing these symptoms, I was really concerned that I may be dealing with the same issues as them. So I went to see a cardiologist, had several tests done, and found out that, to my surprise, I did have heart disease. And what I really didn't know, though, that in dealing with my cardiologist, that I had this rare type of disease called ATTR-CM. So from that point on, it was a big shock to me. But looking back throughout my years, about 10 years ago, I suffered from carpal tunnel syndrome, numbness, tingling in the fingers, swollen knees, swollen ankles, and soreness. And I thought that these symptoms were attributed to the fact that I played many years of professional basketball, bumps and bruises and things like that. And the wear and tear created these problems. But what I really didn't know was that these are the symptoms of this rare ATTR hereditary type disease that's genetically passed down from a relative. So had I known that, I probably would have gotten an early diagnosis and maybe got on medication a lot sooner. But it's just an idea that, you have to really speak with your cardiologist and give them all the information, have a heart-to-heart talk with them, and give them all the information of things that's happening and all the symptoms that's happening to your body.
Yeah,
Yes.
and Don.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Dr. Chavis. Don, we understand that there are two types of ATTRCM. Which subtype of ATTRCM do you have, and what's the difference?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, there are two types, subtypes of ATTR-CM, and one is the wild type, and the other is hereditary type. I've been diagnosed with the hereditary type, which is genetically passed down from a relative. And after my diagnosis, and the symptoms of hereditary type are very obvious to a degree, although it mimics heart-related problems. You're swelling the knees and soreness and things like that. But that's why genetic testing is so important, to distinguish the difference between having the hereditary type and just having regular heart failure or heart disease. And the key to having early diagnosis is to make sure that this particular disease is not passed on, because it's genetically passed down from relative to relative. But you want to make sure that you're not a carrier that passes down to your children.
Very good. Well, listen, we represent the Black press, Don, and there are millions of people that we reach every week in our newspapers, now also in our social media channels. So we're going to make sure that as many people as possible can see this video.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically for African Americans, what does the African American community need to know about ATTR-CM?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, if you have a family history of heart disease, or if you've been personally diagnosed with heart failure, I think it's very, very important for you to see a cardiologist and explain all the symptoms and things like that, to make sure that he can give you the correct diagnosis through genetic testing. That's the only way you can really find out if you have this particular disease. And in the US, the V122I is disproportionately distributed to the Black community. And I think it's very important for Black people who are maybe have some of these symptoms to see a cardiologist and have a heart-to-heart talk with their doctor. Let them know all the things that's happening to your body, and not really hold anything back because you think it's not that important. I think this particular disease mimics, as I mentioned earlier, heart disease and heart failure. So you want to separate yourself and make sure that I'm not just a person who maybe have heart disease, but I have this rare heart disease that could really be passed down from siblings, children, things like that. So you want to make sure that your children are not getting this particular disease.
Yeah, and Don, just to underscore the point, why is it important to find out if ATTR-CM could be the underlying cause of heart failure?
Well, I think it's very, very important because, as I mentioned earlier, there are people walking around with no symptoms at all, and they have this particular disease. And I have a son who I'm trying to really get to have the genetic testing. He's in great shape, feels great, no swelling, great athlete, but he may be a carrier of the disease without any symptoms. I think it's very important for African Americans especially to be tested genetically to make sure that although you don't have the symptoms, you can pass it down to your children.
Very good. We amidst this COVID-19 pandemic, and of course, African Americans are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 because of our pre-existing health conditions. And one of the pre-existing health conditions is heart disease. But you're right, Don, a lot of people just are not aware of ATTR-CM and the importance of getting tested. There's a lot of phobias about Black folks getting tested. A lot of Black folks scared to even go to the doctor, just in general. So what would you recommend, particularly, I know you mentioned your son, how have you handled this with your family, and what would you encourage other families to do, just in general health, but particularly for this form of heart disease?
Yeah. First of all, there's a trust factor, maybe I should say a distrust factor in the Black community because of past history.
Right.
There's a lot of experimentations from the government and from doctors on the African American community. So naturally, you don't have the trust factor there, first of all. And so Black people, when they have ailments or they're not feeling very well, they are reluctant to visit a doctor, number one. But I think the most important thing for African Americans, especially those who have a history, number one, or a family history of heart disease, to take the time to have a heart-to-heart talk with your doctor or your cardiologist and explain to them what's going on with your body and not leave anything out. Because this is a very rare disease. It's a disease that, as I mentioned earlier, mimics heart failure. But at the same time, it's a disease that if it goes unattended and underdiagnosed, it could be fatal. And away from that, it could be passed on to your children. That's the scary thing of all. You have to understand that this particular disease can affect your heart, your nerves, and different tissues in the body. And you have to really get treatment and get medication as soon as possible.
Yeah, and Don, I know that after diagnosis, after treatment, you still have to manage it. What do you do to manage it?
Well, I speak with my cardiologist quite frequently. We have counseling all the time, and we talk about my ailments and my situation. I'm on medication, but I have a great caregiver, and that's my wife, Jackie, who makes sure that I manage my condition as well. I take my medication on time. I realize that, my symptoms change from time to time. She makes sure she takes a pen and write all the things and the changes in my body. And when we meet with the cardiologists and the doctors, we make sure that they are aware and upfront with everything. So we don't keep any secrets from our doctors or my cardiologists, which I know a lot of African-American families, when they go to the doctor, they hold back. They don't trust. The trust factor is not there yet. And I wish we as a community especially Black community, can open up a little bit and start trusting again. And I just think that that's the only way we can stay on top of this particular disease.
Yeah,
Well,
and just, I'm sorry, Dr. Chavis, just a follow-up to that. Don, what are some of the symptoms? I don't know that we discussed some of the symptoms that you might experience and others might experience.
Yeah, I started off with, as I mentioned, palpitations, shortness of breath, and fatigue. And for me, that was shock because I've always kept myself in pretty good shape. But then later on, I look back in my life about 10 years ago, I had carpal tunnel syndrome, which is tingling and numbness and pain in the fingers. I had swollen knees, pain in my knees, my ankles and feet were swelling. And I just thought maybe it's because I played all those years and I had to wear and tear on my body. So I never really mentioned it to my cardiologist because I didn't think they were relevant. So I wish I had, because I think I could have gotten an earlier diagnosis than what I got. It's very important to realize and recognize these symptoms. We have a site in yourheartsmessage.com, yourheartsmessagewithdon.com. A lot of people can tune into to get information on my experience, and also some information on how to discuss your symptoms with the different doctors when you go in and talk about heart-related diagnosis and things like that.
Very good. And before we end this interview, I want to make sure we repeat that website where people can go get information. But I want to go back to, you mentioned the trust factor.
Yes.
We pride ourselves in the Black press. We are the trusted voice of Black America. And that's why doing this interview with you is so important, Don Chaney, because we want to amplify your voice, your experience. And I'm gonna just say parenthetically, you're very fortunate to have a great caregiver in your own wife and your family, making sure that you do what the doctor advises. But in general, trust is something, as you know, has to be earned.
Yes.
It's something that's not given. And so I'm just thinking ahead that we would like to, as we go into 2021, we want to stay in touch with you, not only to rebroadcast this particular interview, but we think it's just so important to get this word out. And I think the source of getting the word out is important. I think to the extent to which we can make sure that we get people in contact with the website that you've listed to find out more about ATTRCM. But also, I think your story is fascinating. And man, people still see you as a hero on the basketball court, bro. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, are you in touch with other NBA players now, or the league? There's a social consciousness now among NBA players and professional sports teams. But kind of just talk to us a moment about that, because I think it's so important for our listeners that are intergenerational. We have not only millennials, but Generation Z and others who are very into sports. And your voice, I think, can help overcome some of the distrust factor so that we can gain trust to get medical care, and specifically about ATTR-CM.
Yes. Well, I, as you know, this is a very rare disease, and a lot of people never heard of it. Even some doctors are not familiar with the disease and the effect it has on African Americans. Now, a lot of them have heard of the disease, but they're not aware of the effect it has on African Americans. And I speak to a lot of my teammates and players, and I try to, although I have this disease, and naturally, I don't wish I'm not welcoming the disease itself, but I have it. And I think it's very important for me. I have an obligation to make sure I spread the news and put this information out there to Black community. As a young Black man, I paid attention more to a voice from a Black person than anyone else. And I think I had that trust. I grew up in the South, so I had that trust. And that's one of the reasons why I want to step up and get as much information out there, because I think I can get the attention of a lot of Black folks who hear this voice because of the distrust in past years. So I feel I have an obligation to speak to people. And I talk to all of my ex-teammates and tell them, talk about it, call me, or check the website out, and just try to get this information out there so people can get to see doctors go in and be examined and have the genetic testing to find out if they are a carrier of this rare type disease.
Just a quick follow-up. How are the players responded to your other players when they find out you're going public, but also making this campaign known?
Well, they were sort of like me. They knew nothing about the disease itself, and they started looking into it. And a lot of guys were aware of heart failure and things like that in the Black community, but they had no idea of this rare type disease that affect the Black community. So they're really open to it. And I've had guys to call me back to get information on it. So I think these are types of conversation you need to get the message out there to the Black community.
Yes.
And Don, can you just again talk about the importance of not ignoring symptoms?
Right. And that was the biggest problem with me. It happened with me. You become your own doctor to a degree. You say, well, this is because of I fell on the court, or I got hit on the court, or I turned my ankle, or this. I think it's very important to really jot down all the things that's happening to you, and you have to really look inside and have a heart-to-heart talk with your doctor. Let him know everything there is that's happening to you, even if you think it's a very minute deal, and make sure that he gets all the information he can to give you the correct diagnosis. You don't want to be misdiagnosed, because it's out there. With this particular disease, there's a lot of misdiagnosis. So I think it's very important to make sure that you open up and give all the information you can to your cardiologist or a doctor.
Yeah, thank you.
Very good. Tell me something about now your family. How many kids do you have?
I have 3 adult kids, yes, and 12 grandkids.
Good. Any in professional sports?
No, they're all in. One is a doctor, teacher, one is in the corporate world. So
right.
They're all doing very well.
You mentioned you were from the South. Where were you originally born?
Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Oh, right. Okay. That's a great hub of Black culture.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time down at Southern University at Baton Rouge.
Yeah, my mom worked at Southern. I lived 1 block from LSU's campus and couldn't go to school there.
Oh, yes.
I had to come to Texas to go to college. Because
I know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, times have changed. If they could get somebody like a Don Chaney in there, they would be glad to do it. So, give out that website again, Don. I want to make sure our listeners get it down.
Yes, it's yourheartsmessagewithdon.com.
Very good. One of the things that Stacy is going to do, he's our national correspondent for the NNPA. We're going to be writing an article about this interview that will appear in all the Black newspapers across the country. We have 230 African-American-owned newspapers from the West Coast, East Coast. Got one in Baton Rouge, actually, the Drum. But the thing is, we also live in the age of digital media and social media. So we want to make sure that this interview also appears on social media channels. Do you have any social media handles or hashtags that we should be looking for?
Well, I can probably give you something. Let's see. Let me see what I have here. Not at this point. Boom, 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 boom.
Okay, well, we may, I want to talk to the campaign about ATTRCM. I want to develop a special hashtag about this particular rare heart disease. Because I think another thing about building trust and information in our community, we have to do it repetitively. You know, when people hear something over and over again, they begin to take notice of it. Yes. So I think this interview, we're going to show it in its entirety, but we're also going to take snippets of it and put it on our social media channels. We have blackpressusa.com. We have the NNPA Newswire service. And then just think about it, all of these newspapers also have websites, so it's 230. And we're going to make sure that all of them have a link to your website so we can get this information out. Stacy, as our senior correspondent, what do you think from a news perspective? I want to break some news about what Don is saying today about this rare heart disease.
Well, one of the major things is to get tested. As he said, African Americans historically, we've been talking about this even with the vaccine for COVID. We have a history of distrust in medical science, in the medical community, but if we overlook these things, it could cause a catastrophe for us. And Don has been talking with his son. I think that's an interesting tidbit too, making sure that he understands that, hey, this is hereditary. And so I think that's a big issue there too.
Right. I know there's a National Association of Black Cardiologists. We work with the National Medical Association, which represents all of the Black physicians. And the good news is some of the leading research scientists now in medical issues are African Americans. There's a sister at NIH that really helped develop the theory on the current vaccine for COVID. And that also helps people to have confidence and trust if they know that African Americans are also involved in the science, involved in the healthcare delivery, involved in the pharmaceutical side. I think that also engenders a greater context for building trust.
Yeah, and we see that too. Dr. Chavis is with several African American doctors, and in addition, Dr. James Hildreth, who was part of the NNPA coronavirus task force that you put together, was on the FDA panel that approved the vaccine.
Yes.
And so we have a lot of that. And then in Don Chaney's case with ATTRCM, to have someone as prominent from the sports world, that's another segment of the another segment in which the Black community does tend to look up to. We saw what LeBron James did over the summer in leading the cry of Black Lives Matter, and taking a stand and getting a lot of concessions from the NBA, and raising a lot of eyebrows. So
right. So I'm gonna
that way.
I'm gonna go back to Don. I'm gonna ask Don for your forecast. Don, based on all of what you know and what you've personally experienced yourself, what's your forecast going forward? Do you think that this is something that we will be able to better inform our community about and get some positive responses from African American families across the nation?
Well, I think this type of platform here is so important in getting the message out. And I think the more we have people in this situation, you guys, broadcasting and writing things in papers and magazines and things like that, I think the more we get that information out to the Black community, eventually we'll get the attention of everyone. So that's one of the reasons why I try to have a voice and make sure that it's known to my friends and everyone else. We can't just be silent in this, because we just have to get it out there. It's an unknown disease, very, very rare. And a lot of people, including doctors, are not that aware of the fact of its effect on African Americans. So I think what you're doing is fantastic. What you guys are doing is fantastic. I'm going to try to do my part and also try to get my friends and ex-teammates to also spread the word. So as much as spreading the word and getting it out there to get the trust back is so important.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Don Chaney. We certainly appreciate you taking out the time.
Thank you. And Dr. Benjamin, you mentioned some type of website. Pfizer also has a website site called Your Heart's Message website. So, if you can't get Your Heart's Message with Don.com, you might want to tap into that as well. Absolutely.
That's very important to know. And as we wrap up, I just want to say on the record to you, Don, we're very proud of you. We are thankful and grateful for your leadership. And there's anything that we can do in the Black press to help amplify your voice, your message about ATTRCM and about this rare heart disease. You can count on us. We'll be there to help support in any way that we can. And then lastly, I want to say best wishes to you and your family during this holiday time. All of Black America is experiencing this pandemic, but there seems to be some light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine being coming out. But we also have to overcome trust in that too.
Yes.
But I think that so the timeliness of this interview is very important. And as we conclude 2020 and go into 2021, from the NNPA perspective, National Newspaper Publishers Association, we're going to make it a priority in 2021 to get this word out about this rare heart disease. And we're looking forward to continue to have an ongoing working relationship with you and with Pfizer.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
All right. You guys take care. We appreciate you.
Thanks.
Thank you. God bless.
You too.